welcome to the deep dive. So you reached out wanting to know what it's really like, behind the scenes preparing for space travel.
Yeah.
Today, we're not doing the big overview. We're zooming right in, taking a really close look at this amazing firsthand account.
Exactly. An astronaut getting ready for a full year on the International Space Station, the ISS.
That orbiting research lab, right?
And we've really dug into their personal thoughts, their observations from right before that year-long mission kicked off back in February 2015.
So this isn't about, the rocket science itself.
No, not today. It's all about the human side, the process of getting ready to leave Earth for that long. We're pulling back the curtain, getting into that nitty-gritty stuff you asked about, things you don't normally hear.
And a full year on the ISS.
Yeah,
that was a pretty big deal back then, wasn't it? Especially given where space travel was at.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the space shuttle had been retired in 2011.
Right.
So NASA was completely reliant on the Russian space program to get astronauts to the ISS. This year-long mission, it was really critical for understanding, what happens to the human body up there for so long.
Okay.
And the whole journey, it starts in a place with a bit of mystery around it. The Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan.
Okay. Let's get into that initial trip.
Yeah.
So first leg, Houston to Moscow, 11 hours. Okay, fairly standard long haul.
Yeah, familiar territory for astronauts, probably.
But then, this van ride to Star City. Tell us about Star City. What's the main thing we need to grasp about it?
Well, the key thing isn't just that it's like a training center. It's basically a whole world dedicated to space. For decades, it's been the place for training cosmonauts and, more and more international astronauts, too.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like a self-contained town. It's got its own mayor, churches, museums, everything. Really shows the history and scale of the Russian program. You even find a big statue of Yuri Gagarin there, the first man in space. Very sort of socialist, realist style, flowers at the feet.
Paints quite a picture. And the astronaut mentioned that even though the Russians built specific housing for Americans there,
Yeah.
it still felt a bit, weird. Like a sort of stereotype of American living dropped in a totally different place. Huge fridges, big TVs.
Right. Kind of like a bubble, but still feeling foreign even after spending loads of time there.
Okay, so after Star City, there's another flight, 1,600 miles this time, to Baikonur. Now that name, Baikonur, there's some history there, even some, deliberate confusion.
Oh, yeah, that's fascinating. The actual launch site, it was built near this little village called Tirana,
Okay.
named after some descendant of Genghis Khan. But the Soviets, back in the Cold War, they deliberately called the whole facility Baikonur.
Why?
Well, Baikonur was a real town, but it was miles away. They did it to basically throw off anyone trying to figure out where they were launching from.
Perfect.
Yeah, and for a while, they even called the launch site itself Star City, just to add more confusion. So the Baikonur we're talking about, that's the real deal launch site out on the desert steppes of Kazakhstan.
Middle of nowhere sounds about right from the description. Stark concrete buildings, crazy temperatures, rusting metal.
Exactly. And they mention the population now is mostly Kazakh, descendants of Turkic and Mongol tribes. Fewer ethnic Russians after the Soviet Union broke up.
Right, so how does that work now with the facilities?
Well, when the Soviet Union dissolved, Kazakhstan became independent and Baikonur ended up within its borders. So now Russia actually leases the whole facility from Kazakhstan. That's why you still see the Russian ruble used, Russian license plates, even though it's in Kazakhstan.
Gotcha. And despite looking maybe a bit run down, rusting stuff, wild dogs, camels.
Yeah, wild dogs and camels right near the high-tech aerospace gear, apparently.
It's still the main working human spaceport for, a big chunk of the world's launches.
Absolutely crucial. It might look desolate, but it's where the action happens.
Then there's the plane they took for that last leg, a Tupolev 134, an old Russian military transport.
Yeah, possibly even a former bomber. Imagine that.
Wow, that's quite an image, isn't it? Astronauts from countries that were, pointing missiles at each other not that long ago.
Flying together on a converted military plane towards this shared goal in space. It's pretty striking.
The vibe on that flight sounds like it was quite spirited. Lots of drinking mentioned.
Definitely seems like a different culture around pre-flight routines. The account highlights this Russian tradition of always having food with alcohol.
Right.
So vodka, cognac, but also tons of snacks, tomatoes, cheese, sausage, pickles, dried fish, even salo, which is like cured fatback.
Wow. quite a spread.
And there's this anecdote about a previous trip getting forced to drink samagon, like moonshine.
Oh, dear.
Sounds like it got pretty chaotic and drunken then. And apparently this flight was pretty heavy on the drinking, too. It really shows a different approach, maybe less rigid than you might expect.
So they land, maybe feeling those effects a little.
Maybe just a bit.
And there's a whole welcoming party waiting. Officials, engineers, the mayor.
Yeah, Roscosmos, energy officials, the people who build the Soyuz, the mayor of Baikonur town, local dignitaries, a whole lineup.
And that ritual greeting again. My gotovi ke sledujishim shigam nashi podgotovki.
We are ready for the next steps of our preparation. Yeah.
That theme of ritual keeps popping up, doesn't it?
It does. And it makes you think, what's the role of ritual in something so high stakes, so technical? Where's the line between procedure, tradition, and maybe even like superstition? In a job with such massive consequences, maybe these rituals offer some comfort, some sense of control.
Could be. Then there's this interesting moment with some local Kazakh children described as little ambassadors. But there was a measles outbreak concern. The doctor warned them off.
Right. The flight surgeon was worried about quarantine, told them to stay away.
But Gennady, one of the Russian crewmates, he insisted on greeting them anyway. Handshakes, flowers.
Yeah, apparently Gennady felt it was important. It's a fascinating little moment where, the human impulse, that connection kind of overrides the strict protocol, even in this super structured environment.
It shows that personal element.
Yeah.
And we get introduced to the crewmates properly here too, Gennady Podolka.
The Soyuz commander.
Yeah.
Very experienced, very trusted. There's that anecdote about him stopping to pay respects near the Kremlin where a politician had been murdered. It says a lot about him.
Yeah. And Mikhail Kornienko, Misha, the other guy doing the year-long mission with our astronaut, quieter.
Seems so. Described as more quiet, contemplative. And he has this really moving backstory about his father dying, which kind of set him on the path to becoming a cosmonaut.
So, quite different personalities then.
Exactly. And you wonder how that plays out over a whole year cooped up together.
Definitely. Okay, so finally, they get on buses to the quarantine facility. Prime crew, backup crew, separate buses, standard procedure.
Right. And Gennady apparently jumped in the driver's seat for a joke before they left.
Huh. And there was a change in protocol. They used to spend less time in Baikonur before launch.
Yeah, it seems like due to cutbacks, they were now doing the full 2 weeks pre-launch quarantine right there in Baikonur rather than splitting it with Star City.
Gotcha. And even the bus ride sounds eventful. Terrible roads, decaying buildings, rusted satellite dishes.
Garbage, camels wandering around. Yeah, paints a real picture of the contrast. Old Soviet infrastructure kind of crumbling alongside the space stuff.
But then also another Yuri Gagarin statue. This one more joyful.
Yeah, a different vibe to the Star City one. And crucially, they get their first proper look at the launch pad. Gagarinsky start.
The historic one.
Immensely historic. So many firsts launched from there. And you get the sense the Russians really value that history, that tradition, maybe more than just having the newest, shiniest facilities.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Which leads us nicely into the next bit. The quarantine itself and all the final pre-launch stuff. Now, this year-long mission, we touched on it, but it really was breaking new ground, wasn't it?
Oh, hugely. We just didn't have much solid data on what happens to the human body in space for longer than about 6 months.
So what were the big questions they were trying to answer, the main unknowns?
Well, things like how much bone density do you really lose over a year? How much muscle atrophy?
Right.
What happens to your vision long term? That was becoming a known issue. The cumulative radiation dose, what's the risk there?
Mm-hmm.
And even the psychological side, being isolated that long. This mission was designed specifically to get data on all of that.
And our astronaut was part of that twin study, too, with his brother Mark back on Earth.
Exactly. Which added this whole other incredible layer of comparative data. Super valuable science.
But the astronaut also lists the personal risks pretty starkly.
Yeah.
Bone loss, muscle wasting, those vision problems, the radiation exposure, cancer risk.
Yeah.
And worrying about family back home, obviously. It really hits home what a physical toll this takes.
It absolutely does. Mm-hmm. But, as they point out, the ISS is so vital, right? For science, for just keeping a human foothold in space, for figuring out how to go further.
It's that balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
Huge risks, huge potential rewards.
Definitely. The ISS costs a fortune. It's inherently risky, but it's our main space lab, our stepping stone. You really get the sense of dedication from the people who do this, acknowledging the risks, but seeing the bigger picture.
Now, the place they stayed during quarantine, it sounds, well, surprisingly plush. Saddam's palace.
Yeah, that's quite a nickname. Apparently quite opulent. Chandeliers, marble floors, suites with jacuzzis.
Jacuzzis.
Yeah.
In Baikonur quarantine.
Apparently so. Bit of a contrast to the desert outside, right?
Totally. And the anecdote about finding Gennady and Misha in the banya, the Russian sauna.
Oh, yeah, relaxing with the birch branches adds a real touch of local culture to the prep. It's a good reminder that even in the super high-tech field, these old traditions are still really important.
Even extends to the food, it seems.
Also.
Well, the dining room sounds quite formal. Pressed tablecloths, fancy china, Russian movies playing.
Okay.
And the food itself. Borscht, meat and potatoes. And lots of dill.
Ah, dill, yes.
And Gennady apparently had a theory about dill helping with, well, gas in confined spaces.
Huh. See, that's one of those amazing, very human details you'd never get in an official NASA report, right?
Exactly. Practical considerations for living cheek by jowl in a metal can for a year.
You got it.
Okay, then comes the fit check. Getting into the actual Soyuz capsule for the first time, in the hangar, Building 254.
Right. Suiting up in the Sokol suits.
Which sounds like a real performance. Awkward getting in through the chest.
Yeah, the description makes it sound pretty clumsy. And comparing the seals to, like, garbage bag seals on the ISS?
It's funny, but also maybe speaks to that practical, maybe less polished Russian engineering approach sometimes.
Could be. Simple and effective. And it's important to remember the Sokol isn't like the big, bulky suits for spacewalks, the EVAs.
Right, it's a rescue suit.
Exactly. Lighter, more streamlined. It's designed just in case the cabin loses pressure during launch or landing. Quick life support, not for working outside. Its history is tied to preventing tragedies like the 1971 Soyuz 11 depressurization.
And those custom-made seats inside the Soyuz? Not for lounging.
Definitely not. They're molded from plaster casts of each crew member.
Wow.
But it's all about safety and saving space. They're designed to absorb the massive impact forces when you land back on Earth, especially after a year of your body adapting to zero-G.
So pure function over form.
Completely. And the astronaut mentions how surprisingly tight it is inside the capsule, even just sitting there on the ground, practicing using the controls, figuring out where to stick timers, pencils, Velcro, customizing their little space.
And while they're in that hangar, Building 254, they can see other spacecraft being worked on.
Yeah, a Progress cargo ship, which looks a lot like the Soyuz. And the next is Soyuz capsule getting ready for its crew launch in July, maybe even parts of future ones being assembled.
Really shows the tempo, doesn't it? The constant pipeline needed to keep the ISS supplied and crewed.
Absolutely. And it highlights the sheer longevity and, frankly, reliability of that Soyuz design. It's been the workhorse for decades. Incredible engineering.
Then they get to see the rocket itself.
Yeah.
The Soyuz rocket, confusingly, also called Soyuz, like the capsule.
Yeah, Soyuz means union, fitting maybe.
And it's prepared horizontally in this huge building, Site 112, which is different from how NASA does it.
Right. NASA typically assembles its rockets vertically on the mobile launch platform and rolls them out upright. The Russians assemble horizontally, then transport it horizontally to the pad and erect it there. Just a different philosophy.
And the rocket itself. Gunmetal gray, rivets visible, looks kind of industrial. Smaller than the shuttle stack was, but still enormous.
Oh yeah, still a beast. Aiming to get them up to, 25 times the speed of sound?
Incredible. And the historical connection.
Yeah.
It's based on the old Soviet R-7 ICBM.
That's the core of it, yeah. The original intercontinental ballistic missile from the Cold War.
That's sobering. Thinking that the ancestor of the rocket you're about to ride was designed as a weapon possibly aimed at your own hometown.
It's a really powerful point the astronaut makes. Growing up during the Cold War under that nuclear shadow, and now preparing to ride a descendant of that very missile technology.
Alongside crewmates who were once on the other side.
Exactly. That theme of international cooperation again. All three of them had military backgrounds. Could easily have been enemies in another timeline.
But instead, they're crewmates on the ISS. This huge, peaceful international project.
It's maybe the most powerful message here, isn't it? Taking weapons and turning them into transport, turning potential adversaries into a team. It's quite profound, really.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, so that brings us to it. The final day on Earth.
And the big one.
Starts with waking up, final packing, logistics, bags for Kazakhstan, bags for Houston return.
Getting all the important info sorted. Mundane, but necessary.
Last earthly breakfast. Baikonur's attempt at American style. Runny eggs, toast, microwave hot dogs.
Huh. Maybe not quite gourmet.
Then more rituals. A final trip to the banya.
Keeping with tradition.
The pre-flight enema, which sounds practical, if personal. Different methods mentioned.
Yeah, a necessary step for long flights, apparently. The details are quite intimate.
Then a jacuzzi bath, maybe a quick nap.
Trying to relax before the intensity ramps up.
Then a visit from Dr. No, who sounds like the quarantine enforcer,
Yeah.
making arbitrary calls.
Seems like it, part of the process. Then another ritual, the alcohol wipe down.
Right. Then a champagne toast, a moment of silence, which is a Russian tradition before journeys.
Setting the tone. A moment of reflection.
And then the blessing by the Russian Orthodox priest.
Another fascinating blend, isn't it? Cutting-edge science, strict protocols, and these deeply ingrained cultural and religious traditions coexisting. The blessing is apparently a long-standing thing for launches there. A bit of hope and protection.
Yeah. Then the walkout. Ceremonial. With that song playing. Bravo Udoma.
Grass near home.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's this really famous kind of melancholic Russian song about cosmonauts missing Earth, missing home. Very poignant.
Must be incredibly emotional. Then the crowds, the rush of people, and that last glimpse of family. Especially that moment, touching hands through the bus window with his daughter, Charlotte.
That sounds heartbreakingly brief. That tension you mentioned between the strict quarantine rules and just that basic human need to connect one last time.
Really says something about the sacrifices, doesn't
Yeah.
it? For everyone involved, the astronauts and their families.
Absolutely. Shows the immense dedication, the resilience required on all sides.
Okay, so then it's off to Building 254 again.
Yeah.
Suiting up building. Russian TV on in the background. A light meal.
Trying to keep things somewhat normal, maybe.
And then actually getting suited up, diapers, electrodes applied.
Yeah.
Needs assistance for all that.
Yeah. It's not something you can just throw on yourself.
Then meeting the family again, but this time through thick glass.
Right.
The astronaut says he felt like a gorilla in the zoo. Such a strong image. Isolating.
Yeah, really captures that feeling of being on display, but also separated.
And seeing his partner, Miko, his ex-wife, Samantha, his daughters, Charlotte and Samantha, you get these really personal reflections here.
It's incredibly intimate. You get a real sense of the complex web of relationships, the support system that makes these missions even possible.
His description of Miko, their unconventional partnership, her own career journey at NASA, it's very moving.
Yeah, it sounds like a really strong partnership built on mutual respect and support, even without being married. Her overcoming adversity. It's quite a story.
And then reflecting on Samantha, his daughter, the difficult birth, that fierce, protective instinct.
Adds another layer of emotional depth to these final moments. And seeing his other daughter, Charlotte, seeming happy despite everything. The gratitude towards Miko for supporting them.
It's a lot to process right before launching into space.
For sure. And seeing Mike Fink, Spanky, there too. Another astronaut there specifically to support the family during this period.
That really shows the camaraderie, doesn't it?
Mm.
The astronaut corps looking out for each other's families.
It's a tight community. They understand what the families are going through.
Then another procedure. Lying down in a Soyuz seat mock-up, helmet closed, for leak checks. 15 minutes. Another one of those ritualistic moments with people watching.
Yeah, it seems like everything has its specific process, its moment. Build confidence, check systems, maybe follow tradition too.
And the last talk with the families, but over microphones, everyone hearing everything.
That's awkward.
Yeah. He mentions focusing more on nonverbal stuff, like making eye contact, that I've got my eyes on you gesture. Communicating across the barrier.
Trying to bridge that gap in a very public yet intensely private moment.
Okay, finally. The walk out to the parking lot. It's dark, freezing cold, floodlights, waddling in the Sokol suits, carrying cooling fans.
You must feel completely surreal by this point, encased in the suit, carrying your own little air conditioner.
Wearing 2 pairs of gloves for germ prevention.
Right. Quarantine protocols right to the end.
They board the bus to the launch pad, sitting in their assigned spots, Commander, Flight Engineer 1, Flight Engineer 2, last wave to the family.
That final wave.
Yeah.
The mood on the bus must be intense, contemplative.
Sounds like it. They drive towards the pad, but then they stop.
Ah, yes, for the tradition.
The tradition. Apparently, everyone gets off the bus, and the men, at least, pee on the right rear tire.
Following Yuri Gagarin's example from the very first flight, it's amazing how these things stick.
Apparently, women bring bottles to contribute their part, too. It sounds almost absurd, but clearly deeply meaningful for them.
It's a perfect example, isn't it? Science, risk, technology, and this very earthy, almost superstitious ritual right before launch. Grounding, maybe?
Maybe. Then back on the bus, continue towards the pad, Brief stop for the train, fueling the rocket.
Just another part of the complex choreography.
And then something totally unexpected happens.
No.
His brother Mark shows up, breaks quarantine, just appears by the bus.
Wow, that's huge. After all the strictness.
Right. Apparently, it was a completely silent moment between them, just eye contact, but incredibly meaningful. Riding the rest of the way to the pad together, thinking about their journey from blue-collar New Jersey to, well, this.
That's incredible. Talk about the human element pushing through. What a powerful moment right before leaving the planet. So, yeah, you wanted the details of getting ready for space. As you can hear, just getting to the launch pad is packed with, well, everything.
Absolutely. So we've followed this whole journey. This is an incredibly detailed account.
Yeah.
As we wrap up this deep dive, what are the main things that really jump out at you? The biggest takeaways?
You know, what really strikes me is this amazing mix. On one hand, you have the super meticulous planning, the science, the logistics, everything figured out to the nth degree.
Right.
But woven through all of that are these deeply ingrained traditions, these cultural quirks, these really profound moments of human connection, and even stuff that seems, well, kind of bizarre, frankly.
Like peeing on the tire.
Exactly. It all comes together in this pressure cooker leading up to launch. It just hammers home that even when we're doing these incredibly advanced technological things, it's still fundamentally about people. It's a human endeavor.
Yeah, you really feel the anxieties, the love for family, that bond between the crewmates, and this real sense of history weighing on everything, even with all the futuristic tech around them.
Totally. It speaks volumes about, the human spirit, our need for connection, how we find comfort and meaning in rituals, especially when we're facing something truly massive and challenging.
So maybe here's something to chew on after this. Think about other really ambitious things humanity does. Big scientific projects, maybe major artistic creations. What other strange, maybe illogical-seeming rituals might be hiding underneath the surface?
Interesting question.
And what purpose do they serve? What comfort, what deeper meaning do they provide when people are pushing boundaries, facing huge challenges? It's that balance, isn't it, between the hard science, the traditions we carry, and just the human element. Worth thinking about.